Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into an absolutely beautiful piece of writing today. It's by the legendary author Ruskin Bond, and it's called When the Trees Walked, A Living Legacy. Seriously, this is such a heartwarming story. It's all about a grandfather, his grandson, and a legacy that quite literally takes root. We've got some fascinating ground to cover, so let's just dive right in. Okay, let's start with a kind of crazy question. Can trees walk? Now, I know what you're thinking. On the surface, it sounds like something straight out of a children's fairy tale, right? No way! But actually, this single, super imaginative question is the engine that drives our whole story today. It sets up this deeply moving way of looking at nature. You know, Ruskin Bond kicks things off by painting this incredible, vivid picture. He describes sitting with his grandfather in that soft sunshine of a North Indian winter, and they're just watching this tendril of a creeping vine. And get this. In just 20 minutes, it trailed all the way across a veranda step specifically to touch his grandfather's feet. Now, Bond notes that, sure, there's a scientific explanation for this, something to do with light and warmth, but he says it really felt like the plant simply wanted to be near him. It perfectly establishes this almost magnetic, magical connection his grandfather had with the natural world. And there's this really fascinating dynamic between the grandparents. So, on one side, you have grandfather. He's a retired veteran of the Indian Forest Service, and all around their newly built bungalow on the outskirts of Dehradun, he's out there planting these massive timber and fruit trees: lime, mango, eucalyptus, jacaranda, Persian lilacs, the whole shebang. On the other side, we have grandmother. Now, she didn't mind the trees, but her real passion? Ordering catalogs and seeds to grow these beautiful, meticulous flower gardens. It's just a really fun contrast, right? Two totally distinct relationships with nature, living right there in the exact same backyard. But they did find common ground, and it reveals something pretty special about how grandfather viewed the world. He had this simple, brilliant rule. There's only one way to attract butterflies, and that is to grow flowers for them. You see, grandfather happily helped grandmother out with her gardening, but not because he was suddenly obsessed with flower gardens. He did it because he saw the bigger picture. He absolutely loved watching butterflies, and he understood how the whole ecosystem connects. To get the insects he loved, he knew he needed to support the environment she was cultivating.
And grandfather's philosophy was just so definitively nature first, sometimes to a highly amusing degree. There was this old, crazy, vigorous peepal tree in their compound, and it was literally forcing its way right through the walls of an abandoned outhouse, just knocking bricks down left and right. Peepal trees are actually described in the story as great show-offs because their leaves spin like tops to get your attention. Naturally, grandmother wanted the super aggressive tree cut down immediately, but grandfather's response? Let it be. We can always build another outhouse. I love that. It completely encapsulates his deep respect for just letting nature thrive on its own terms.
All right, let's move into part one, a forest for the future.
So it turns out grandfather wasn't content just planting trees in the safe, cozy, domestic garden of his house. During the rainy season, he'd actually walk out into the wild jungle beyond the riverbed, carrying cuttings and saplings. And when his grandson asked, why are we planting stuff out here where literally no one will ever see it? Grandfather delivered this chillingly relevant warning about exactly why humanity needs trees. He explained that they're absolutely essential. They keep the desert away, they attract rain, they stop riverbanks from washing away, and they provide timber, food, and shelter for the animals. He basically warned that humanity is cutting down trees without replacing them, and if we don't plant a few ourselves, a time is going to come when the entire world just becomes one giant desert.
Now, for the young narrator, the thought of a world without trees became, frankly, a bit of a nightmare. So to shift away from those stark, scary facts and bring it back to a positive emotion and to really inspire some enthusiasm for the hard work they were doing, grandfather taught him a poem by George Morris. It goes, "Woodman, spare that tree, touch not a single bough, in youth that sheltered me, and I'll protect it now." It's just this incredibly beautiful moment of a grandfather passing down a profound reverence for nature to the next generation.
And that reverence brings us straight to the myth of the walking trees. Grandfather told this incredibly whimsical story. He said that trees actually used to walk around like people for thousands of years. But then, some interfering busybody came along and cast a spell, rooting them to one single spot. But here's the secret to the metaphor. They're constantly trying to move. Grandfather pointed out how trees reach out with their arms, and how some, like the banyan tree with its traveling aerial roots, actually manage to get quite far. It's this gorgeous metaphorical layer that completely sets up the climax of our explainer today. Okay, jumping into part 2, the island experiment. So, they found this small rocky island out in a dry riverbed. It was completely bone dry in the summer, but flooded during the monsoons. And the inspiration for this project?
One single, small mango tree was somehow growing out there. Grandfather's logic was super simple. If one small tree can manage to grow here, so can others. So here was the game plan. First, wait for the monsoon rains to set in. Next, cross the river while it was still actually safe to do so. And finally, they spent the whole entire day planting tamarind, laburnum, and coral tree saplings. This wasn't just some random way to kill an afternoon. It was a highly intentional act of creation.
Now, as you might guess, the monsoon season brought incredible life, springing up in the most unlikely of places. But not everyone was thrilled. Grandmother, for instance, was definitely not a fan of the jungle literally invading her house. She declared, "I'm not going to have my roof brought down by the jungle." Having a peepal tree take root right in the ceiling or a mango sprouting on the windowsill, yeah, that was just a bit too much monsoon magic for her. It's just a great bit of tasteful humor that really shows the overwhelming, unstoppable force of nature when the rains hit.
But well, life happens, and things change fast. In 1939, the Second World War begins. The narrator gets sent away to boarding school and ends up living with his father in Delhi during the holidays. Meanwhile, the grandparents sell that beautiful Dehradun house and move to England. Then, about 2 or 3 years later, the narrator follows them over. So we're basically fast-forwarding through several years of narrative downtime and separation here. Lots of time passes before the narrator finally makes his way back to Dehradun.
Which brings us to part 3, the return.
All right, the scene is officially set for our emotional payoff. It's February, some years later, and the narrator decides to take a walk out of town towards that old dry riverbed. And the transformation he found, absolutely astounding. What used to be a bare, rocky island and a dry watercourse had completely transformed into a small green paradise. The visual contrast was just striking, and was highlighted immediately by the spectacular red blooms of the coral blossom, the very same ones they had planted as tiny saplings all those years ago.
And it wasn't just the plant life that changed, it was a fully thriving brand new ecosystem. Listen to this exact sensory detail Bond provides. Who are you? Who are you? That is the mellow challenge of a crow pheasant, living right there among the new trees. When the narrator walked up, he saw that squirrels had moved into the branches as well. This barren rock was now a bustling, vibrant home. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute heart of the entire story. The trees seemed to know him. They whispered among themselves and beckoned him nearer. Looking around, he noticed that other smaller trees, wild plants, and grasses had actually sprung up under their protection. They had multiplied. And then this real goosebump-inducing realization hits him. The trees were walking again. Right there, in this small corner of the world, Grandfather's dream had come true. They had walked by spreading life.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. What will your living legacy be? Grandfather didn't just plant a few trees. He planted an ecosystem, a philosophy, and a memory in his grandson that outlasted distance, outlasted war, and outlasted time. When we think about our own impact on the world, planting for the future, whether that means literally planting trees or just nurturing positive ideas, is both deeply personal and massively globally relevant. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible piece of writing. Keep learning, keep planting, and I'll see you next time.